Ladies and gentlemen, for his final invocation at Dunn School, Mr. Ralph Lowe.
Socrates, widely regarded as the ugliest man in Athens, and under a 30-day leave before he was scheduled to kill himself for the corruption of Athenian youth, was in an ox cart on the road to Piraeus, the port where he had heard peace had broken out. He loved the ancient oaks that lined the sea road. He was well aware of oak irony, gnarled, mossy, and misshapen by time and Attican dust, but supported by a spine of strength that was known to tease the gods with occasional hints of immortality. The olive trees were very old, but fragile, hard at work building shade and fruit. There were no warships in the bay. The Spartans were off sharpening swords and practicing their humorousness in their archery. They would, the old teacher knew, be back. He knew that his senses were sharpened because soon he would have none. But he found giddy delight in naming things, watching tides and constellations. He let sand run through his fingers, exulted in the fragrance and tang of every fig and olive. He ate the great haunches of roasted goat, village tomatoes, and drank it all down with retsina. He was always looking for an audience. He had a reserve of puns and body jokes, weird conundrums, impossible questions that could only give loft to flights of fantasy, speculation, and short-lived but delicious pleasure. Soon he would climb back onto the ox cart and head back into Athens, where he had fashioned the very syntax of the general conversation, and had set the whole world spinning towards discourse and reason that made for a primordial soup of sophistication as in no other place at no other time. His students would greet him. They would drink deeply and wait for the hemlock that would cancel the mind of a man who invented, with a little help from his friends, teaching and inquiry that would turn the world of the mind of the very earth on its head. It was Socrates who lifted us from the dust in the Promethean whirlwind we should never forget. He was just too much. And he did it without electricity or phony clouds. Only the great fire of the Library of Alexandria could make a real dent. Something had come to earth, out of the wind, and was here to stay when he told us that the unexamined life was not worth living. And there was no percentage in dawdling or evading or drowning. We need solitude, courage, and vigor to get to the very spine of ourselves. He would have you blow up your monitors, melt your games, and meet all the beasts or angels head on. Little wonder they killed him. Scrutinize, imagine, ruminate, and keep your mouth shut or share those illuminations with those who love you, those who would have you blossom and not shrink. And the material is everywhere. Walt Whitman, the great American sage of things great and small, would have us consider a leaf of grass as evidence of some sort of divine strategy, where he urged us that we look closely at the ear of an infant and see all the proof you need of a greater hand. Steady on the course is the plan for each of us to discern. God, said Einstein, is in the details. Do this alone, when it is quiet, when there are no bells ringing or tweeters tweeting. Recognize that awesome is God's adjective and does not apply to an especially well-prepared hamburger or a song by Katy Perry. The world would drown us in frothy images, insipid tunes, and slander, if not for the moments when we see the oaks for which they truly are to each of us. In the oak, I see a place sometimes from which owls go to work and ravens to sleep. the misshapen, mossy shell housing muscle and sinew that is vital and timeless. By far, most of the people in the world are good, tolerant, gracious, and kind. They are trying to bring precious water home to their families from failing wells in the sides of arid mountains, and not, as Hollywood would have it, chiseled movie stars battling in some post-apocalyptic zombie carnival. Rather, it is a struggle for clarity against odds that grow more cumbersome and gross every day. What Socrates and his togaed buddies did between the Agora and the Acropolis, in that most unlikely of towns, so very long ago, was to devise a means to hold the fog and the wolf at bay. From the small and the seemingly insignificant, they extrapolated the planetary, if not cosmic, ramifications of what could or what wasn't going to be. What they asked was the truth of the matter that endures when we are dust again. What survives pestilence and war? What are the verities that continue to enchant and goad us to tolerance, compassion, and maybe a sense of grace? Whitman saw the simplicity and complexity of the universe in his leaf of grass. The Buddha saw it beneath the bo tree, Muhammad in his cave, Jesus in the unforgiving desert, and Noah on a drenched world looking for a place, like Columbus, to land. They didn't know what it was actually, but their questions, meditations, and ruminations became their own reward. God, for billions, would take on a human shape, and that meant the doors of perception were properly yanked from their hinges. We could be alone in a room, a desert, or on a forbidding savanna, and think about it, considering the history we knew and the history we as the species was making. The Agora moment saw the midwifery of humankind, when the mobility of human thought came within reach. Homer, Shakespeare, Gandhi, Lincoln, Picasso, and a list of other thinkers and artists, happily very long, responded in a rainbow of languages to the seductions of genuine thought and intellectual inquiry. Socrates saw the piebald duckling become the majestic swan. Whitman watched worms take flight into ephemeral butterflies in their shadows. And yes, the humble acorn becomes, in another generation or three, the mighty oak. If you can pilfer a moment amidst, and despite the hullabaloo which follows the ceremony, you might sneak out here and put your far too short arms around this tree, which rises so far above and so far down at the same time. Adieu, adios, kalisperas.